From its inception, Call of Duty Zombies has been more than just a game mode. It's been an experience, an art form that has terrified and amazed players for over a decade. We have played maps like Verruckt or Kino Der Toten that disturbed us when we were younger. As we got older, we enjoyed the epicness of maps like Eisendrache and Origins, but today, most of us don't enjoy modern zombies nearly as much as the old stuff. And while there are a few reasons for that, the biggest one is without a doubt the downfall of art direction in COD Zombies. So, let's start from the beginning. Chapter 1: The Era of Fear. At this point, it is crucial to understand that COD Zombies was never intended to become anything. It was developed by a small group of employees at Treyarch, where it eventually reached the attention of Activision, who allowed them to put the side mode in the upcoming game. Zombies was introduced with the launch of Call of Duty World at War on November 11th, 2008. However, Zombies wasn't listed as another game mode like it is today. Upon completing the campaign or connecting the online server, the player was granted access to the mysterious Zombies game mode. It was essentially a mission to see how long you could survive slaying zombified German soldiers. There was no overarching storyline, no main quest, no bright colors. Zombies was about one thing: survival. Now that you have some context about the creation of COD Zombies, what made up the art direction of the first ever Zombies map, Nacht Der Toten? The German name Nacht Der Toten translates to English as Night of the Undead, which perfectly describes the map. The player is suffocated in a small bunker occupied by German forces within an abandoned airfield. Perks and Pack-a-Punch were not yet created, leaving wall buys and the mystery box as the only form of protection. There truly is very little to Nacht Der Toten, just the player and their rapidly growing anxiety as the rounds increase. As far as art direction goes, the lighting of the map is very grim. Dim, flickering lights cast eerie shadows across the damaged concrete walls. The faint glow of the mystery box in the distance feels like the only sign of hope amidst the suffocating darkness. Even when peering outside the map, a cloud of fog consumes your vision, making you feel even more trapped. The whole experience feels almost as if you're in a nightmare with nowhere to escape. However, it doesn't quite end here. Due to Call of Duty Zombies not being planned, there was no initial story, until later maps began implementing a broad narrative. Because of this, there are no player voice lines on the original World at War Nacht Der Toten, no silly characters like Richtofen or Nikolai to comfort you in this terrifying endeavor. Despite the lack of main character voice lines, there were plenty of spooky ambient sounds and zombie voices to be heard. Early on, Treyarch leaned heavily into the anxieties of early zombies, which gets even more extreme in the very next map. Verruckt, or its English translation, Crazy, is set within an abandoned insane asylum in Wittenau, Germany, a district in northwest Berlin. Verruckt features a brighter color palette than Nacht, with a heavy emphasis on tans. The designs throughout the building are much more detailed, with checkered floors making up one side. The layout of the map creates a square around the center courtyard, which is inaccessible to the player but creates a nice eerie aesthetic. Unlike the thick fog surrounding Nacht, Verruckt's exterior featured fenced-off courtyards, ruined buildings, and scattered trees, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Now, in order to make up for this increase of colors, space, visual elements, and the introduction of perks, Verruckt had to go above and beyond to make the map feel just as scary and isolating as Nacht Der Toten felt. And Treyarch did just that. Verruckt had significantly more unsettling sounds, a bloody dentist chair that plays echoey memories of drills spinning and patients screaming, distant crying sounds, alarms, and spooky noises coming from the power box. On top of this, the map was more difficult than Nacht. While Verruckt wasn't drastically larger, its narrow hallways and sharp corners made movement more claustrophobic and unpredictable. The isolation of the map expanded even further for co-op. Players within the same game would be split up from spawn, having to open the majority of the map to reunite with each other. Gameplay choices such as this describe exactly how Zombies was intended to feel in the beginning. The developers wanted to incite fear into the player, making them feel isolated and uncomfortable. At this stage, Zombies was truly about horror, and it's no secret why Verruckt is usually described as the scariest Zombies map. Following Verruckt, Treyarch moved in a much different direction. Leaving the constraints of German locations, Shi No Numa took place in a 115 infected swamp in Japan. Unlike previous maps, this one felt as though the environment was your enemy. The invasive nature of the swamp seeped into the structures of the map, feeling almost as hostile as the zombies themselves. The wooden buildings felt unsafe as the swamp was slowly consuming them. Verruckt had a straight-up horror feeling, while Shi No Numa was eerie and mysterious, but that did not mean it didn't have some extremely gruesome elements, and without getting too much into it, Peter McCain is a prime example. Overall, Shi No Numa was highly anxiety and fear-driven, yet it showcased Treyarch's ability to get more creative with it, stepping out of a German location and placing the player in the swamps of Japan. The fear continues into Der Riese, mostly due to its great innovations. This map introduces a variety of staples in the Zombies fandom, including Pack-a-Punch, the Monkey Bomb, teleporters, and more. The new innovations brought a complexity and scale to Zombies we have not yet seen, making a game mode built on overwhelming the player even more overwhelming. Despite introducing new mechanics, Der Riese maintained a haunting tone. Bloodstained labs, failed experiments, and Samantha's chilling laughter made it clear Group 935's scientific ambitions had spiraled into something truly horrifying. At this point, there were 4 World at War maps, and Treyarch was soon to have their next game come out. On November 9th, 2010, Call of Duty Black Ops released, and with it, 2 brand new zombie maps, the first of which was Kino Der Toten, or Cinema of the Dead. This Zombies experience was actually intended to be in World at War, but the developers decided it would make more sense as the first map in Black Ops. The Cinema of the Dead is another map taking place in World War II Germany, this time in an abandoned theater. Despite being in a brand new game with higher quality gameplay and graphics, Kino Der Toten was extremely similar to its World at War counterparts. It's a German facility overrun by zombies, and as far as innovation goes, it doesn't add too much from the previous game. However, the one aspect that Kino innovates in is its design creativity. The first 3 maps in World at War were excessively straightforward. Nacht was a tiny 2-story bunker, Verruckt was a 2-story building molded into a square, and Shi No Numa was a small swamp connected by the building in the spawn room. Der Riese, and specifically Kino Der Toten, created much more complex layout designs. For example, Kino has the spawn room with the beautiful iconic staircases. It also has the main stage room and even a little side area in the alley. Kino feels much more like a complete location compared to the sectioned off areas of previous maps. At this point, Zombies was no longer a fun little side project. It had morphed into a fully fledged game mode. Despite all this newfound creativity, the developers did not take any steps back in the fear department. The unsettling sounds and frightening ambience was still there, exactly like we saw it in World at War. The other launch map was vastly different from anything we have seen thus far. Five took zombies into a popular real-world setting for the very first time. the Pentagon. While it wasn't as destroyed as Kino or Verruckt, this map was far from pristine. Bloodstains, bullet holes, and shattered glass told the story of a government facility that had fallen into chaos. The aesthetics were moved far away from the desolate horrors of the previous maps and shifted into a much different form of fear. While 5 had some open areas like the spawn room and war room, much of the map forced players into tight corridors and labs. These confined spaces, combined with aggressive zombie spawns, made 5 feel extremely suffocating. It was exceptionally hard to feel safe within the Pentagon. In fact, one of the main forms of travel revolved around getting in a slow, compact elevator, which was obviously very risky when dealing with hordes of zombies. On top of this, the teleporters were also difficult to deal with. Unlike previous maps, 5's teleporters sent players to semi-randomized locations, making escape routes unreliable and often putting them in worse positions than before. Still, 5's hatred of the player was not done there. This map also brought in the Pentagon Thief, a sly figure who sprinted at you with the sole objective of stealing your weapon. While offering a fun and unique mechanic to the map, it helped contribute to the player's fear. It brought a whole new version of challenge to the zombies mode. Overall, 5 wasn't quite as fear-inducing as some of the World at War maps in terms of aesthetics, but the gameplay was becoming more and more complex, and still was fairly challenging, which continued zombies' early goal of fear, but it also marked a shift, moving away from pure horror and into high-stakes, strategy-driven gameplay. This was only the beginning of the mode's evolving identity. Ascension is an extremely important map for the history of zombies. It introduced the first main quest Easter egg, offered the most expansive map at the time, and had the most interesting form of travel yet, with the lunar lander. While Ascension lacked the raw terror of its predecessors, it still had unsettling elements. The map opened in a washed-out black and white filter, giving players an eerie, lifeless introduction. The launch facility itself was run down and abandoned, with echoes of machinery humming in the background. However, compared to past maps, Ascension felt more open, larger, and less isolating, making it the first major step away from zombies' roots of horror. A big aspect of making the player feel terrified while playing zombies comes down to how small you make them feel. In World at War, the maps were quite compact, and felt like tiny parts of larger areas you were hopelessly trapped within. Now, with maps like Ascension, you felt some freedom. It was largely outside, felt big in scale, you could fly over the map, and there was a main quest, effectively beating the game for the first time ever in zombies. Ascension truly acts as a turning point in COD Zombies. Call of the Dead introduced a unique and oppressive atmosphere. The foggy, snow-covered Siberian coast, combined with abandoned ships and an ominous lighthouse, made it one of the most isolating maps in zombies history. It felt like a place you were never meant to escape from. Call of the Dead made the environment just as deadly as the zombies themselves. The icy water slowed players, making them easy prey, while the harsh blizzards and constant fog limited visibility, increasing the feeling of helplessness. Despite being a map that takes place primarily outside, Call of the Dead has plenty of tight spaces and corridors, which feels even more compact with George Romero chasing you around. George wasn't just a boss, he was a constant looming threat. His presence meant players had to be mindful of every shot fired, as angering him would send him into a furious sprint. Mr. Romero never truly left. Even if defeated, he always came back, reinforcing the feeling that you were never truly safe. Call of the Dead is a bit more unnerving than 5 and Ascension, yet the likes of George Romero and the weakness of the wonder weapons makes the gameplay of this map the driving factor of fear. Call of the Dead wasn't terrifying in a traditional sense, but it introduced a new kind of fear, one driven by constant danger rather than an eerie atmosphere. This map forced players to stay on edge at all times. It wasn't about scaring the player, it was about making them feel hunted. Shangri-La fully embraced the idea of the map itself being an enemy. The temple's shifting pathways, deadly spike traps, and unpredictable mud pits constantly worked against the player. This was not a map that encouraged free movement. It forced players to adapt on the fly, adding another layer of difficulty to the ancient temple deep in the Himalayan mountains. As far as design goes, Shangri-La was the first zombies map to take place in broad daylight, a stark departure from the dark and grim locations of the past. However, the vibrant setting didn't eliminate fear, it simply reshaped it. The claustrophobic jungle, the temple's tight corridors, and the overwhelming presence of shriekers and napalm zombies made players feel stuck in an ancient death trap. Unfortunately, graphics at the time were a bit too underwhelming to create the atmosphere that was likely intended for this map. It's brighter, yet still dull. Thankfully, on the other hand, the Black Ops 3 version in Zombies Chronicles did eventually do its atmosphere justice. The Black Ops 1 edition still has plenty of fear-inducing elements within the gameplay, but this map took a massive step away from the fear aesthetics. Within the last few maps, Easter eggs had increasingly become more prominent, and making the player feel scared and uneasy was less of a focus. These emotions of fear and anxiety were still here, but mostly because of the difficulty and learning curve that each map had. In World at War, the maps were very straightforward, but each one since Der Riese took another step towards complexity and a step away from fear. The game mode was changing rapidly, and the next map pushed boundaries that no one ever thought would be possible for Call of Duty Zombies. Chapter 2: The Era of Maximalism. In case you are unfamiliar with the term maximalism, it essentially takes the common phrase "less is more" and replaces it with "more is more," and DLC 4 of Black Ops 1 describes this idea perfectly. Moon was a groundbreaking map that took zombies to a scale never seen before. It introduced low gravity, a functioning life support system, and even new enemies like the astronaut zombie. The Easter egg was the most complex yet. It required multiple steps involving special equipment like the hacker vice, coordinating with the excavators, and even manipulating QEDs. Additionally, it was the first Easter egg to permanently alter the zombies storyline, culminating in the catastrophic destruction of the Earth, an event that directly set up Black Ops 2 Zombies. We ended World at War with a simple German facility, and now Black Ops 1 was ending on the moon. This map still had fear-inducing elements, but that was no longer the goal. Treyarch moved on from these simple horror aspects of zombies and into this era of maximalism. Black Ops 2 brought a host of new features. Buildables, permaperks, the bank, and even new game modes. The launch map Tranzit also pushed the maximalism of this era into new heights. The biggest map ever took place in Hanford, Washington, and introduced features never before seen like the bus. Even though parts of the map were creepy, such as the dense fog and the cornfields, the map itself wasn't trying to terrify the player like it had in the past. This new era was in full swing, and complex gameplay was now the purpose of zombies. In fact, Treyarch even took it too far. Tranzit was overly large, and due to graphical limitations, the developers were forced to put debilitating fog, lava, and denizens to slow down the player. Other innovations, such as buildables, were unique, but quite tedious, as you could only hold one part at a time. Tranzit was so focused on being maximalist that it made some questionable innovations, causing the art direction to suffer quite a bit. Despite having great moments like Town and the Diner, the overall atmosphere of the map was a brown, foggy mess. Despite launching with Tranzit, Black Ops 2 also offered Nuketown Zombies for Season Pass buyers. This experience was a zombified version of the classic multiplayer map Nuketown, set after the nuke went off right outside of the town. While holding maximalistic aspects such as the crazy concept and giant crater right outside of the map, it was relatively tame for this era. Nuketown Zombies is rather forgettable and doesn't add much to the tremendous catalog of Call of Duty. Die Rise's art direction is extremely interesting. The outside of the map is absolutely beautiful. It takes place on top of collapsing skyscrapers in China. Looking around at this destroyed civilization is awesome, and it comes with an even better skybox. Chunks of the earth float in the sky as comets streak past, creating a surreal, apocalyptic backdrop. This skybox, combined with a decimated skyline, creates a very unique look, something that you can only get with Die Rise. Most previous maps took place inside or had a foggy sky, Rise's moon being the only major exception. While Die Rise innovated outside the map, it shared many of the gameplay issues that plagued Tranzit. When looking at the art direction, places like the spawn and rooftop were visually pleasing, while many of the inside corridors were forgettable at best. The skyscrapers themselves pulled off the destroyed look quite well, but the colors were a bit bland, something that Treyarch would later improve upon. Buried's maximalism is mostly due to its concept. This map takes place in a buried old western town under a collapsing mine in Africa. Now, if you've never played this map, I'm sure that made absolutely zero sense. To summarize, after the events of Moon, where we blow up the Earth, the tectonic plates shift from the nukes, somehow transporting this western-style town into the depths of an African mine. That idea is absolutely insane, and I'm glad Treyarch was able to conceptualize it. The art design creates a nice contrast between the mine and the Wild West theme. The wooden, dust-covered structures of the Old West sharply contrast with the modern mining equipment and underground cave systems, ultimately giving the player the feeling that this combination should not exist. Set pieces such as the maze, the ghost mansion, and even the giant Arthur adds to the map's chaotic fun. At this point, Call of Duty Zombies is far into the maximalist era, leaving fear and anxiety largely out of the mode. Buried helps solidify this due to its goofy, over-the-top nature, something that we could never have received in World at War. There is still a spooky ambience and unsettling sounds within these Black Ops 2 maps, but it's less common and less unsettling. Following Buried, the Call of Duty Zombies franchise takes a big shift. The lead director of Zombies, Jimmy Zielinski, was on his way out, effectively leaving the studio for Black Ops 3, and this left Jason Blundell leading the team for the next map, the brilliant Mob of the Dead. Mob provided the community with a great storyline, atmosphere, and surprisingly a good amount of fear. It was truly the last point in Zombies history where fear was a large part of the design. Unsurprisingly, a zombified Alcatraz prison was scary. The gory set pieces, blood-painted messages, and horrific ending were all extremely important to the aesthetic of the map. It felt like for the first time in years, Zombies was going for a fearful art direction again. But in my opinion, this map combined the era of fear and maximalism perfectly, which is why it is considered one of the greatest maps of all time. The maximalism itself can best be seen through its horrors. The grotesque imagery of decay and death is pushed to the extreme, reinforcing the map's nightmarish setting. A giant zombie warden and prison guard zombies with glowing red eyes is nothing we would have ever seen in World at War. Yet, in some ways, it was even scarier. Unlike earlier maps that focused on survival horror, Mob of the Dead's fear was psychological, rooted in themes of eternal punishment and despair. The prison itself felt alive, trapping the characters in an endless cycle of torment. The dark, foggy scenery greatly added to this desolate feeling, and within the famous prison, COD Zombies finally brought back the unsettling ambience of the past. Overall, Mob of the Dead took the fear era and combined it with the maximalist era, creating an over-the-top, terrifying Zombies experience, which was a major reason why this map is so loved by the community. Origins is an extremely important map within this era. It expanded the maximalism to a much further extent. Origins marks the introduction of the Primus versions of our classic crew, Richtofen, Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takio. Unlike their previous appearances, these new characters were younger and from a new dimension. The map itself is located in northern France during World War I. Its depiction of war is exaggerated beyond realism. Rather than being a simple historical battlefield, the map transforms the trenches and ruins into a nightmarish, larger-than-life setting where everything feels more apocalyptic. Similar to maps like Moon and Die Rise, Treyarch greatly emphasized features like the skybox, which is spectacular here. A blue-tinted, foggy skyline with giant robots walking throughout the map, and countless planes fighting in the air. The giant robots in particular brought a sense of scale we have almost never seen in zombies, making players feel small and powerless in comparison. Unlike static set pieces, the robots actively move across the map, stepping over trenches and even crushing players if they are not careful. This turns the environment into a dynamic, ever-changing landscape, which is quite similar to experiences like Call of the Dead, where the map is against the player, but the way it's done here is far more interesting. The best part of Origins' art direction is likely the clash between the World War I setting and the supernatural. For example, elemental staffs, the crazy place, and an army of zombies and panzers doesn't make any sense with the war-torn battlegrounds of World War I. Yet, Origins combines these ideas in an extremely interesting way, using element 115 to create something that is so uniquely Call of Duty Zombies. It is no surprise that many believe this map was the height of the game mode. Black Ops 3 Zombies was now here, and the community was desperately waiting to see what the launch map would be, and personally, I believe Shadows of Evil has the greatest art direction in Zombies history. Shadows is heavily inspired by 1940s American cities like Chicago, New York, and even San Francisco, combining their aesthetics into the fictional Morgue City. But like every other map in the Maximalist era, it was turned up a few notches. The map was bright and vibrant, but also featured elements of noir and Lovecraftian horror, a combination that makes absolutely zero sense, but was ultimately brilliant in execution. Treyarch likely went in a super vibrant art direction on this map to showcase the brand new capabilities of the Xbox One and PS4. Every Call of Duty Zombies game mode from World at War to Black Ops 2 was greatly handicapped by the Xbox 360 and PS3 consoles, but now that Treyarch had upgraded tech for Black Ops 3, they could dive into the maximalism even more. For example, fog was no longer an issue in Black Ops 3. As I said previously, maps like Tranzit had to use excessive amounts of fog to make sure players could run the game efficiently, which in some cases held back the beginning of the maximalist era. However, the floodgates were now open, and Treyarch could make these extravagant maps with almost no graphical limitations. This can best be seen with the skybox. It starts off as gloomy and dark with desolate rain falling on the player, but it changes as you unlock Pack-a-Punch, revealing a giant apothecon in the sky, with a nightmarish red seeping over the map. The Lovecraftian influence continues with the enemies you fight. The towering three-headed Margwa, the tentacled parasites, the flying insects, and the meatballs, which are actually called insanity elementals for some reason. These monsters cover the streets of Morgue City with evil and provide the most unique enemy types in Zombies history so far. The visual overload makes it clear that Morgue City has been consumed by something far beyond human understanding, creating arguably the most unique and creative Zombies map of all time. The next map is something a bit more simple and less innovative compared to Shadows of Evil. Shadows was a bit out there for many fans, and Treyarch wanted to create a maximalist experience that they knew the community was going to love, which is exactly why we got Der Eisendrache. But before we take a look at this fan favorite map, I would ask that you consider subscribing to my channel. It lets you know the next time I upload a Call of Duty Zombies video, and it lets me know that you're enjoying these videos. So thank you. Anyways, let's take a look at the beloved castle in Austria. Prior to Black Ops 3, I would never use the word beautiful to describe a zombies map, but Shadows of Evil and specifically Der Eisendrache are absolutely gorgeous. It is set in a medieval castle high atop a snow-covered mountain, inspired by the real-life Hohenwaufen Castle in Austria. Overlooking a vast valley, the map conveys a grand sense of scale, making players feel both powerful and insignificant at the same time. The city below appears distantly far away, and the other mountains in the distance look huge. The snowy aesthetic and rolling clouds provides a very pretty skybox, which looks even more appealing with the nice blue tone covering the outside portions of the map. The blue hue becomes even more impactful once it's combined with the 4 elemental wonder weapons. Playing Der Eisendrache with a squad of 4 players ignites the atmosphere with light blues, oranges, deep blues, and purples, making the whole experience even more visually appealing. The core ideas of the map combine a state-of-the-art rocket testing facility with a magically enhanced medieval castle, a juxtaposition that works perfectly. But there's also another aspect that carries over from Shadows of Evil. Due to story implications, the boss fight of the map involves facing off against a giant keeper, supernatural, ghostly beings connected to the apothecans. The ethereal enemies are surrounded by glowing energy fields and are highly stylized, turning the fight into an epic spectacle of light and chaos. Overall, since Mob of the Dead, COD Zombies had been on a hot streak, combining maximalism and other unique elements to create massively innovative maps, and Der Eisendrache continued this streak. However, the following map began to shine some cracks through the floor of Call of Duty Zombies. Set in a lush, mysterious tropical island in the Pacific, Zetsubou No Shima essentially took the ideas of Shi No Numa and multiplied them by 10. Where Shi No Numa's environment was subtly hostile, Zetsubou No Shima makes nature an outright enemy. The overgrown plant life doesn't just obstruct movement, it spawns mutated thrashers, spreads toxic spores, and corrupts the very air you breathe. Nature in this map is not merely a backdrop, but an active participant in the chaos. There are crash planes, abandoned facilities, and nature infested in every single corner of the map. The maximalist art direction ensures that every element from vegetation to eerie environments feels alive and overwhelming. Zetsubou No Shima is not a map where you feel isolated, instead you feel overwhelmed. Even the 2 bosses on the map are deeply affected by the environment. The giant spider is enlarged and enhanced by element 115 on the island, and so is the other boss fight, Ultimus Takio, who is essentially turned into a giant thrasher, locked within a prisoner's cell. As far as coloring goes, this experience is exceptionally green, even within the enclosed parts of the map, where all of the experimentation takes place. Zetsubou's art direction is well executed just like the other Black Ops 3 maps thus far, but in my opinion, the ideas here weren't as appealing as the grandiose nature of Der Eisendrache and Shadows of Evil. Gorod Krovi translates from Russian to English as City of Blood, and that describes the atmosphere perfectly. The map takes place in a war-torn Stalingrad, and when I say war-torn, I absolutely mean it. The city is decimated. On top of this destruction, there's also another interesting element within the map: dragons. The devastation throughout is complemented with the massive dragons flying throughout the sky, and you even get to ride one to pack a punch. Not only does this city have dragons, it also contains some extremely high quality tech. The supercomputer that is essential to the Easter egg, the flying Valkyrie drones, and the Russian manglers are all technologically advanced, creating an overall dystopian atmosphere within this experience. The skybox makes Gorod Krovi feel even more dystopian, as its dark colors consist of dragons and planes flying throughout the sky fighting each other. On the ground, the map feels unmistakably Russian. It's filled with Soviet imagery and propaganda posters that feel straight out of the Cold War era. The colors of Gorod are largely made up of tans from the buildings and rubble around, but also have a heavy emphasis on sharp reds. The eyes of the zombies, fire from the dragons, and other mechanical elements all depict striking red colors. colors that add some much needed variation to the art direction. Gorod Krovi is without a doubt one of the largest feeling zombie maps ever. It feels as though you were dropped into a dimension of catastrophic war, invaded by dragons and zombies, which is quite literally what happened. To end off the tremendous Call of Duty Black Ops 3, Treyarch decided to make the most maximalistic map yet. Revelations was very unique as it combined the loved parts of many different popular maps. Shangri-La, Eisendrache, Kino Der Toten, Mob of the Dead, Origins, Nacht, Untoten, and Verruckt were all main parts of this experience, ultimately creating an environment merged together into extreme chaos. The dark blues highlight the interdimensional location of Revelations, creating an atmospheric masterpiece. The sky above Revelations is filled with cosmic horror, as asteroids drift through space and a giant apothecon monster looms menacingly, with its belly housing the Pack-a-Punch machine, one of the map's many surreal features. Revelations handles contrasting colors perfectly. The vibrant blues of the map blend nicely with the yellows found inside the belly of the beast. The maps within Revelations are not just imported and exported versions from before. They have uniquely adjusted layouts and other small changes to certain areas. They also flow beautifully between one another. On the other hand, Revelations isn't just maximalist based on its looks. It gives the player just about everything gameplay-wise. The upgradable Apothecon Servant, Ray Gun, the Thunder Gun, and Lil Arnie's give the player almost too much to work with. Revelations took Black Ops 3 Zombies out on a tremendous boom, creating arguably the most intense maximalist experience in all of Zombies. Black Ops 4 released on October 12th, 2018. At this point, Call of Duty Zombies was coming off of the immense hype that was Black Ops 3 and the Zombie Chronicles DLC, which was the most popular gaming DLC ever for a couple of years. With this hype and attention, Treyarch wanted to do anything and everything to capitalize on their recent success. They aimed to make BO4 bigger and better than ever. They created more maps with larger Easter eggs and extremely maximalist atmospheres, but they were a bit conflicted, misusing their influence. They decided to split Black Ops 4 into two parts, the Chaos and the Ether storylines, each containing 4 maps. The Ether storyline would be a continuation of where Revelations left off, and the Chaos storyline was something entirely new. Either way, Treyarch was experiencing some internal conflicts on which direction they wanted to move Zombies forward. From the perspective of art direction, it makes more sense to understand the Chaos maps first, before looking at the final 4 Ether maps. So the very first BO4 map we will cover is 9. Taking place in a reimagined version of the Roman Colosseum, the zombie-infested 9 is a maximalist dream. The setting feels larger than life, and the dynamic crowd either applauding or booing the player based on their playstyle is highly creative. Similar to many BO3 maps, 9 showcases a bold, high-contrast palette of deep reds, burning oranges, and golden hues, symbolizing both the glory of the Colosseum and the zombified horror within its walls. The Chaos storyline as a whole is heavily influenced by mythology, which appears all around the map. Each of the 4 main temples represent a different ancient religion. Ra, the Egyptian sun god, Danu, the Celtic goddess, Zeus, the Greek god of the sky, and Odin, the Norse god of wisdom and death, each of which are important centerpieces to the map. 9 follows the BO3 trend of combining different styles into something that only zombies could do. And in the case of this map, it's the Roman Colosseum, mythology, and endless zombie hordes. Overall, 9 is one of the most cinematic feeling maps in Zombies history, from the chanting crowd to the bright movie-like colors and the phenomenal setting. Also, the new enemy types are unique and create a learning curve while playing in the unsettling underground regions. 9 served as the perfect introduction into the Chaos storyline. The following Chaos map, while being maximalistic, went about it in a very unique way. Voyage of Despair was a Titanic-based COD Zombies map. Following in 9's footsteps, Voyage was based off of a real-life historical location. For those of you that don't know, the Titanic was a massive ship that was said to be unsinkable. But in 1912, it hit an iceberg and sank, leaving thousands of people dead. In Voyage of Despair, the map's design is not just inspired by the real-life architecture of the Titanic, but it's heavily influenced. While it's not exactly a one-to-one scale, it's very similar, accurately portraying rooms like the grand staircase, first-class lounge, and the boiler room. The only major difference being that it's condensed down and certain areas are either changed slightly or damaged by the iceberg, which is specifically when the map takes place, moments after the iceberg strikes the ship. The map is tremendously detailed, and the bright reds and white of the interior blend beautifully with the dark clouds looming outside. Voyage does an amazing job of creating that isolating feeling that many early zombie maps had. Despite the grand nature of the ship, that's all there is. You are completely alone fighting hordes of zombies. Voyage of Despair succeeds in creating a strong art direction, but in my opinion, they focus so much on making the Titanic feel as realistic as possible that they missed out on the weird and wacky combinations of other maximalist zombie maps. Experiences like Gorod Krovi combine dragons with a war-torn city and advanced technology. In my opinion, Voyage is missing its own version of the dragon, something else to help the map feel unique within COD Zombies, a franchise that, at least in this era, has always been extremely creative. Dead of the Night is once again set in 1912, but this time in a lavish mansion in England. The outside regions are dark and gothic, with a bright and lively mansion centerpiecing the play area. The structure itself is grandiose and feels large enough to house hundreds of guests, holding extravagant staircases and art rooms. The luxurious designs continue on with the beautiful rugs, bookshelves, and dangling chandeliers. All of this rich interior design contrasts nicely with the eerie fog, dim candlelights, and dense woods of the exterior. As a whole, this map feels dense and cluttered, with Treyarch filling every corner in with tremendous detail. The many tight spaces of Dead of the Night make facing terrifying mythological creatures such as the Nosferatu and werewolves an absolute nightmare. They are quick and agile, keeping the player constantly on edge and moving. The maximalist nature of Black Ops 4's DLC 1 is not only found in the art direction, but in the gameplay as well. Dead of the Night was infamous for its overly complex setup and Easter egg steps, which alienated many players, especially since the map was released with very little marketing. Black Ops 4 was continuing to become more and more complex with each and every map. Easter eggs were more complicated, maps were bigger, and the setup process took lots of effort to memorize. Since the very first Call of Duty Zombies map, the game mode was expanding and growing with every single release. And at this point, many fans had moved on, as they can no longer keep up with the long, in-depth YouTube tutorials just to pack a punch or unlock the wonder weapon. The growing complexity of zombies had alienated most players. However, it seemed that there was no end to this maximalism in sight. Ancient Evil was the final release of Black Ops 4's Chaos storyline. Set in the ancient fictional Greek city of Delphi, this map was beautiful from top to bottom. The famous Greek architecture is absolutely stunning. Giant statues of Greek gods, towering pillars, and spectacular marble structures make up one of the most visually stunning zombie maps to date. The diversity in color palette is another major highlight of this art direction. The main section of this map is on the brighter side with tans, greens, faint reds, and blues. However, when you fly the Pegasus that takes you to the center of the world, the atmosphere completely changes. The faint vibrance of the main map is traded for a dark, magnificent pack-a-punch room, highlighted by vibrant reds and decimated Greek architecture. The wonder weapons of this map perfectly added to the theme. They were gauntlets that each harnessed extraordinary power from a specific Greek god or goddess. Specifically, specifically Hemera, Uranus, Gaio, and Charon, the ferrymen of the underworld. The final map of the Chaos storyline is tremendous and grand in scale, causing fans to wonder why this was the end of a short-lived era. Following the Chaos maps, Black Ops 4 had to conclude the Ether storyline with the final 4 maps, the first of which was Blood of the Dead. This map once again takes place in the infamous Alcatraz prison off of the coast of San Francisco. Blood of the Dead takes the beloved Mob of the Dead and reimagines it, adding new gameplay features, expanding the map size, and placing it in the Black Ops 4 engine. As you may remember, Mob of the Dead was a very maximalist experience, but being so close to the horror era of zombies, it was still very scary. I even highlighted how it took the fear-inducing aesthetics of previous maps and turned it up even further, with a giant zombie warden, zombies with glowing red eyes, and blood-splattered messages. However, Blood of the Dead doesn't quite manage to bring back that signature art direction that Mob had. The colors are similar and the map looks better due to graphical improvements, but the atmosphere isn't quite as impactful, and changes like the overcrowded Black Ops 4 HUD doesn't help the art direction at all. At this point, Zombies is so far from the fear era that a map like Mob of the Dead, where fear is a core aspect, doesn't quite work as well as it used to. Blood of the Dead is a prime example of the ever-increasing maximalism of zombies. It took an in-depth masterpiece like Mob of the Dead and tried to do too much. Parts of it were successful, and despite the gut-wrenching ending to the Easter egg, the map was overly complex and convoluted, and the average player wasn't interested. Similar to Blood of the Dead, Classified was a reimagining of another Zombies map taking place in an important historical location. This one was of course the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. This reimagining had many of the strengths and weaknesses we saw in Blood of the Dead. Classified was a graphically improved expansion of 5, with different gameplay features. While the original 5 felt as though a zombie outbreak had just begun, Classified makes the Pentagon look absolutely dismantled. The destruction is beautifully detailed, and just like all Black Ops 4 maps, the little things are done very well. Wires hanging from the holes in the ceiling, presidential portraits majestically hanging on walls, and vicious bloodstains soaking up the flooring. Classified even expands the confines of the Pentagon to Area 51's Groom Lake, which is where Pack-a-Punch is located on the map. Overall, this experience is far from the most maximalistic map in Black Ops 4, as it's still fairly similar to the original. Unlike other BO4 maps, Classified has no traditional Easter egg quest. Instead, players unlock the final cutscene, a crucial piece of the Ether lore, by surviving 150 rounds. The maximalism in 5 mostly has to do with the extra detail placed into these small corners and pockets of the map, showcasing how Zombies as a game mode has gotten much more complex since the early days of Black Ops 1. Alpha Omega is once again another reimagining of a previous Treyarch map. In this case, we're going back to Camp Edward, or Nuketown, located in the United State of Nevada. Nuketown Zombies is expanded upon greatly. The original was a zombified version of the multiplayer map, while Alpha Omega is much bigger, even adding an expansive underground laboratory. The atmosphere is much brighter and more colorful than the original. The skybox showcases the clouds opening up following a lightning-filled storm, and the bright sun shines on the streets of the destroyed Camp Edward. Alpha Omega feels significantly more like a government facility than its predecessor Nuketown. Large barbed wire fences, watchtowers, military vehicles, and USA flags everywhere. The art direction of the outside parts of the map are a more lively version of Classified, while the downstairs areas are reminiscent of a vault scene in the Fallout franchise. The Cold War themed diner with neon lights and checkerboard floors take you back in time, while While areas like the bedroom and generators are more militaristic, Alpha Omega creates an interesting juxtaposition between innocent civilian life and deep military roots. While this map was executed well in terms of design, many fans were disappointed that the second-to-last Ether map revisited Nuketown instead of introducing a brand new setting. After dozens of COD zombie maps taking place in the Ether storyline, many fans expected the final map to be a brand new maximalistic adventure, potentially rivaling the ambition of Revelations. But instead, what we got was, you guessed it, another reimagined map. COD Der Toten, or the English translation, Day of the Dead, was a reimagining of the Black Ops 1 map, Call of the Dead. Looking past the disappointing context of the map, atmospherically it created something quite enjoyable. It took the secluded, hopeless, frozen winter of Call of the Dead and placed a radiant, hopeful sun in the sky, melting much of the frozen ice away. This Siberian sunrise was absolutely gorgeous, creating one of the best skyboxes in Zombies history. The yellows, oranges, purples, and blues painted the sky with a hopeful feel that was a nice change of pace for this map. That was the end of a 10-year-long story. COD Der Toten was expanded upon the original, adding a new spawn room and laboratory on top of the mountain above. The map's maximalism is best seen in its sheer scale. As one of the largest zombie maps ever, it allows players to traverse from icy shores to the towering mountain, offering breathtaking views of the entire layout, effectively ending off the game mode we love with a bittersweet send-off. After making it through 5 Call of Duty zombie games, we have seen the franchise go from a simple survival quest to a complex mystery hunt. Black Ops 1 introduced Easter eggs, and by the time Moon came around, they were the main focus, while fear was pushed to the side. Black Ops 2 welcomed in extremely ambitious maps, with some failing miserably and others becoming the most loved in the franchise. Black Ops 3 continued building these more ambitious experiences, and with the help of new-gen graphics, crafted some maximalist masterpieces. Black Ops 4 continued to push forward, making bigger, more in-depth maps, but ultimately alienated the community. Treyarch spread themselves too thin. Creating 8 maps within one game was a tall task, and limited funding led to 4 of them being reimagined ideas to end off the beloved Ether storyline. On top of this, fans didn't gravitate towards the Chaos story. On both fronts, people were less interested in zombies compared to Black Ops 3. The game mode had become too much. Easter eggs were overcomplicated, maps were confusing, the maximalist art direction was still strong, but not as spectacular as in Black Ops 3. And most importantly, zombies no longer had anything to do with fear. By Black Ops 4, the game mode had nothing in common with its early days, which meant that a large portion of the core fan base moved on, and Treyarch was left with no choice but to change the game mode drastically. Chapter 3: The Era of Lost Identity. With the popularity of Call of Duty Zombies at an all-time low, the community was curious to see what direction the mode would take next. Would they continue with maximalism, go back to the nostalgic era of fear, or try something entirely new? That's a question that the upcoming Call of Duty, Black Ops Cold War, was going to have to answer. Cold War started strong, providing players with a solid reintroduction into the game mode with Die Maschine. Located in an abandoned German research facility in Poland, this map intelligently combined nostalgic moments of the past with brand new ideas. The old perk system came back, as well as the first ever zombies map, Nacht Der Untoten, which can be accessed right outside of the spawn room. It was clear that Die Maschine wanted to recapture the attention of nostalgic zombies fans. But that does not mean that the map failed to innovate. Features like the HUD, gun progression, health, difficulty, and even the art style were completely revamped. The abandoned facility trapped in a snowy wilderness was a nice aesthetic, but the art direction was vastly different compared to previous games. In Die Maschine, colors were more dull. The bright yellow and red graffiti on the walls of Nacht or Untoten didn't pop all that much at all. The skybox outside of the map was fairly bland. Black Ops Cold War's art direction went for a much more realistic approach, aiming for more detailed textures but a less expressive color palette, a change that would leave myself and many others scratching our heads. Die Maschine did introduce another playable dimension with the Dark Ether. When entering this new dimension, the map became overwhelmed with blues and vibrant purples, offering a nice change of pace to the otherwise stale aesthetics of the map. Other details like the HUD and armor system confused many fans, mostly because they were ripped straight out of the new Warzone game mode. Warzone was Call of Duty's version of a battle royale, and it proved to be massively successful during the COVID-19 pandemic. After a few down years for Call of Duty, having an extra profitable game mode like Warzone proved to be massively influential, which is exactly why elements of Warzone seeped into zombies. It was clear that Activision was trying to capitalize on the brand new players addicted to Call of Duty for the very first time. Overall, Die Maschine was different. Despite having a trailer that made the map look quite intimidating, this abandoned facility was far from scary. Die Maschine was pretty easy, and it failed to create a terrifying atmosphere. However, it also wasn't maximalist. The Easter egg was fun, but not anything we hadn't seen before. The map design was also sort of dull. No extreme colors or crazy concepts. As a whole, the map wasn't very ambitious, and the new Dark Ether storyline failed to grab the audience's attention. In general, while the map wasn't awful by any means, it wasn't spectacular either. Following Die Maschine, DLC 1's Firebase Z released. The spawn room of this map is quite pretty. Taking place in the Soviet Omega Outpost 25, Firebase starts off very intriguing. The skybox is a bright sun peeking through an overcast sky above the vast jungles of Vietnam. This small village is surrounded by towering mountains covered in trees. However, this village-like spawn room is quite small, and instead of expanding into an entire map, you simply teleport somewhere else, which is the actual Firebase Z. The Firebase itself is frankly quite ugly. The militarized Soviet structures are bland and colorless. The ground is muddy and brown. This lack of color and atmosphere still fails to strike almost any fear onto the player. World at War maps were almost exclusively ugly, but they used tight corners, frightening ambience, and challenging gameplay to make players feel fear. However, these aesthetics are seen nowhere on Firebase. Also, it's far from maximalist as well. It's a boring military facility we've seen time and time again. Unfortunately, just like Die Maschine, the art direction is far weaker than Black Ops 3 or 4. On Black Ops 3, for example, Der Eisendrache, Zetsubou No Shima, and Gorod Krovi all had government facilities within them, but they differentiate themselves so much atmospherically that it didn't matter. On Firebase Z, the facility is bland and feels uninspired. Apart from the pleasant rising sun within the skybox, the map does nothing to catch the eye of the player. Outside of the spawn room, there are very few redeeming qualities of this map's art direction, and at this point, Cold War Zombies felt uninspired and lacking artistic vision. A few weeks after Firebase Z, COD Zombies tried something entirely new, Outbreak, an open-world, objective-based form of zombies. And while I do find it quite interesting, I wanted to keep this video to round-based only, so the next map is Voyage Der Toten. After a rocky beginning to this new era of zombies, Voyage Der Toten proved to be a step in the right direction. Taking place in a zombie-infested Berlin, Germany, this map actually had a very intriguing atmosphere. The dark sky was overcast with a slight purple hue. The moon was glowing down upon the damaged cityscape. The orange vibrance of fire shined through the windows of multiple buildings. Neon signs lined the collapsing skyline that contrasted beautifully with the dark tones tones of the night. Unlike both Die Machine and Firebase Z, Mauer actually felt destroyed. The buildings were collapsing, massive cracks in the roads, and even mountains of destroyed cars were piled on top of each other. Mauer is also exceptional in layout. Spawning on top of an apartment building's rooftop showcases the gorgeous views of the map, but having the ability to travel to other rooftops, the streets below, and even underground lets you experience this damaged urban area in a fun, fast-paced manner. Overall, Mauer's art direction isn't among the absolute best in the franchise, but it's still very strong and worth acknowledging, showcasing that Treyarch hadn't completely lost their touch. The fourth and final Cold War Zombies map was extremely unique. Forsaken was located in the USSR during the Cold War era. This Soviet military base was intended to be a secret, disguised as an American-themed town. It featured arcades, fast food restaurants, and movie theaters. This creative idea paired well with the 1980s era this map took place in, crafting a map that was bright and jubilant. Taking a step back, the spawn room is outside the facility, and despite looking fairly similar to Mauer, it looks quite beautiful. The blue ripple in the sky showcases the dark ether tearing through reality, bringing some intense color contrast to the map. After teleporting into the main military base, the uniqueness of the map is truly displayed. The contrast between military equipment and a stereotyped American town flows nicely together, creating an atmosphere somewhat similar to Alpha Omega. The colors within Forsaken are actually quite good. While some areas have the stale colors of other Cold War maps, the town locations are bright and vibrant. Specifically, neon purples and pinks steal the show. Atmospherically, the map is strong, but the weak layout and overly easy gameplay of Cold War holds Forsaken back from reaching its greatest potential. Black Ops Cold War had come to an end with only 4 maps, which is the least we have seen from a zombies game since World at War. Cold War undoubtedly did some great things for the zombies mode. It backtracked from the over-maximalistic Black Ops 4, brought back the original perk system, and provided an experience that wasn't overly intimidating to new players. However, Cold War was scared to take any chances. Basically, all of its innovations and changes were either directly inspired from Warzone or included removing awkward features from Black Ops 4. Cold War felt new and different, but in reality, it wasn't. On top of this, Treyarch somehow got worse artistically. Though Black Ops 4 had many issues, graphically it was stunning, and most of the maps were a treat to look at. In the case of Cold War, 2 maps had good atmospheres, one was okay and one was downright bad. Colors in this game didn't pop as much as previous ones, and textures felt a little too realistic for my taste. Overall, Cold War's inability to take risks on the gameplay side and decline in art direction made the game forgettable and lacking in identity, but it wasn't a downright failure, just a confusing moment in zombies history, leaving fans fearfully optimistic for the next Black Ops title, BO6. On October 25th, 2024, Black Ops 6 released with 2 launch maps, the first of which was Terminus. Set in the Philippine Sea, this collection of islands were fairly interesting. The aesthetics of the advanced research facility and coal mines meshed together really well. Also, the dark and bleak atmosphere of Terminus was very strong, with rain constantly pouring down upon the player. Terminus was innovative in gameplay. Using boats to get around the chain of islands was something we hadn't seen before in Zombies, which technically created the biggest map of all time, if you include the playable ocean. While Terminus had excellent locations like the Biolab and Shipwreck, our introduction to Black Ops 6 was plagued with many of the issues seen in Cold War. The colors were a bit dull, and the atmosphere didn't feel nearly as grand as the maximalist era. However, it was still an improvement over the previous game. There were far more little details to this map, like zombies that would be eating a deceased soldier before you enter a room, zombies stuck in cryo-freeze chambers breaking out and attacking you, and even a giant poison cloud that chases the player if they stay in the water for too long. Terminus felt as though it was trying to re-enter the maximalist era, but lacked some of the passion and creativity that games like Black Ops 3 had. The other launch map, Liberty Falls, takes place in a small town in West Virginia. The map captures the aesthetic of a quiet, isolated town featuring outdated buildings, old-fashioned storefronts, and a compact landscape. But the recent outbreak overtook the map with zombies, effectively damaging the town greatly. In Cold War, and especially Black Ops 6, Treyarch went for much more recent zombie outbreaks compared to maps of the past. In almost every previous zombies game, the maps were decayed and destroyed as a result of long-term abandonment or zombie inhabitants. However, in this era of lost identity, the destruction seen around the maps is significantly more tame, which isn't as successful at capturing that Call of Duty Zombies atmosphere that we know and love. While Liberty Falls has strong elements like the unique zombie design that ranges from high school cheerleaders to farmers and a beautiful dark ether church room, the overall coloring of the map is quite bland. Liberty Falls is similar in concept to Town from Black Ops 2. While Town has worse graphics, it creates a strongest atmosphere because of the massive destruction. The lava seeping out of the ground, the damaged buildings that have giant holes in the walls, and more make Town feel much more like a zombie-infested town. Liberty Falls was obviously not going for the extreme decay seen within most zombies maps, but in my opinion, that art direction works much better for the game mode. Citadel De Moore released as a part of Season 1 Reloaded on Black Ops 6, bringing back that castle aesthetic that zombies fans know and love. Taking place in a European castle, Citadel was conceptually similar to Der Eisendrache. However, it managed to create a uniquely strong atmosphere. Citadel was mostly brown and green. The colors once again did not pop as well as maximalist era maps, but in this case, it made more sense. This map was an old run-down castle. Citadel was somewhat foggy and eerie, creating a sense of mystery zombies hadn't seen in years, specifically the spawn location. You load into the game eyeing the magnificent Guardian statue, and behind him is the Citadel itself, which is probably the best foreshadowing we've ever seen in zombies. Other locations, such as the courtyard that overlook the bottom portions of the village, are quite pretty. Unfortunately, the skybox is plain and forgettable, as it's overcast during the daytime. Citadel is an atmospherically rich map, making it the strongest so far in the era of lost identity, but it's still held back by issues that plagued Black Ops 6 and Cold War. The fourth map in Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is the Tomb. Despite mixed reception about the gameplay mechanics of this experience, the art direction is quite interesting. The spawn room takes place in a compact archaeology site. Following that, the player enters the tomb, which is full of countless skulls on the walls, ancient statues, hieroglyphs, and more. Then the player ends up in the temple, which is a stunning underground area filled with mystic energy. The tomb also features the dark ether, which offers the best skybox zombies has seen in over 5 years. The most impressive part of the tomb is how jam-packed it is with ideas, even though it's tiny. Every room serves an atmospheric purpose, which can't be said about many of the maps in this era. The only major issue with the art direction is a problem that affects all of Black Ops 6. The colors just don't stand out to the level that they did in Black Ops 3 or 4. In my opinion, this game needs a massive saturation increase on every map. In summary, the art direction of COD Zombies started strong in World at War, scaring players off with the unsettling tones of the maps. Black Ops 1 held on to this fear, but created more ambitious, complex ideas, taking zombies to the next level. Black Ops 2 shifted the goal of zombies away from fear and into maximalism, which led to some growing pains. Black Ops 3 further enhanced the maximalism with the help of the new and improved graphics, proving to be the peak of zombies in the opinions of many. Black Ops 4 expanded maximalism even more, ultimately making the game mode too complicated for most players. Following BO4, Black Ops Cold War reset zombies, beginning an era of casual gameplay and a lost identity of art direction. So far, Black Ops 6 has improved upon Cold War's ideas, but failed to bring back the impactful art direction that zombies used to have. Call of Duty Zombies is a game mode that was never meant to exist, but the passionate developers at Treyarch had a vision they wanted to bring to life. The mode quickly developed into something massive, spreading its influence among not only those within the gaming community, but even pop culture. Currently, Call of Duty Zombies doesn't know what it wants to be. It's still enjoyable, but not quite to the level of its glory days. Either way, Black Ops 6 has a lot going for it. Citadel De Moore is genuinely a great map, and the other 3 experiences are a lot of fun as well. Even Liberty Falls is enjoyable, which is exactly why you should go and watch my last video, The Biggest Lie in Zombies History.